Today's episode is all about preparing us for a very big offseason here in the Tennessee Titans franchise. We are coming off a year in which we finished 4-13. We'll select at number 1 in the draft. And today we're going to break down this draft from our perspective. I plan to go position by position and show you everything I think about this class. Some positions will get much more focus than others just based on our needs. One of the first things I think is important to do is to figure out what scheme we're going to be running next year defensively, because I want to move this to a 4-3 defense. Base 4-3 is my favorite because I want to have man-to-man corners and play a lot of man defense going forward. And this allows us to also have archetypes for field general linebackers, pass coverage, and run stoppers. So we can always put guys in certain spots and they will fit and have better scheme fit percentage using this scheme. Consider that Aleem McNeil, who's out for the year, and Rashawn Gary, who finished the year injured as well, are not listed here. I feel pretty good about the front four, but linebacker is certainly going to be one of our greatest needs next year, and going to a 4-3 means we'll have to find 3 guys we're comfortable starting in our base defense. I'm also going to be looking at safeties in the draft, despite the star development breakouts we had for both John Barrett and Brian Cook. I'm just not convinced that these two are going to be great starters, and I still think that Barrett has holes in his game, and Brian Cook I think is good in a very specific role, given his lack of speed, but his abilities with his physicality. I think, I play a lot of cover 3, and that means you're going to have a safety who plays more in the box, and Brian Cook in that more Cam Chancellor style role I think works, but I've talked about wanting to make this more of a man-heavy scheme. And so there are coverages. We can play robber coverage where we have one deep safety and the other safety just kind of roams the middle of the field a bit. But in either case, I don't think Cook offers us a lot in coverage, which really worries me. For the offense, of course, we're going to be focused a lot on the quarterback position. We've talked about that throughout the season. I think we have to also be aware of what opportunities are there for a running back of the future, with Derrick Henry going to 31 years old, and a complementary playmaker around Devian Bynes and Sal Sexton, 2 guys that have proven themselves, but also have missed time with injuries. I want us to get a little bit deeper at wide receiver this offseason. And then in regards to the offensive line, I like where we are right now, but Trevor Penning is one player that does have some big weaknesses we have to keep in mind. He does not do well against the really athletic finesse rushers, as we saw in the finale against Von Miller when he gave up a lot of pressures. So if we end up going to more of a traditional offense, maybe less run heavy, I think Penning fits this team less. But there's also the opportunity to maybe move him inside to guard. If we ended up moving him to guard, I think that would probably move Nate Davis into a potential trade opportunity, or where is his contract at this stage? He's still got time left, so I think that, if it got to that point, he'd probably be a trade candidate. But today's video is meant to be focused on the draft, so why don't we get into the draft today? And I have written down the stories that I have noticed throughout the season. Not all of them are actually on the board right now, so I'm glad I have that stuff. And we'll start off here with the top 10. Here in the top 10, we do have Tim Bishop as the number 1 player. We have a couple pass rushers, a couple corners, and then you get to wide receiver Trayvon Randolph, the top quarterback Joshua Holcomb, tackle Evan Hewitt, Zamel Randolph, another defensive lineman. We have a running back from Penn State, Tramel Hale, and tackle Justin McCoy out of Tennessee. This draft is meant to be very strong with cornerbacks, wide receivers, and running backs, the most exciting positions at times the draft. Weaknesses: interior offensive line, not looking great. Keep in mind, here are our draft picks, but remember, I will be giving Atlanta's first-round pick back to them and turning it into a second as a conditional trade. They did not go to the Super Bowl, so we're not keeping their first-round pick. Meaning we'll pick at 1, 33, 59, Along with 56, that's what 24 is going to turn into. We'll have 3 second-round picks, the number 1 pick, so plenty of chances for us to look at a trade up. Going position by position now at quarterback, we have some really good first-round options. I currently have 5 quarterbacks on our board, and I have liked Brian Nava the most, as he is the best pure passer in this draft class. He has a quick, compact throwing motion. I think that's very important. I think Malik Willis has a really slow motion. Nava has great to elite throw power to go with the best blend of accuracies in the entire draft. B deep, A medium, and B short accuracy. B under pressure is nice to have as well. However, D throw on the run, spin move, stiff arm, carrying, none of that suggests that he's going to be able to be very mobile. He only has decent to solid speed, marginal to decent acceleration. So Nava's just a really high quality slam dunk first round pocket passer, it seems. Now the projected board has Josh Holcomb a fair bit higher than him as a top 10 prospect. We got a story earlier in the season that Joshua Holcomb's, I think, dad was a former athlete. So we have a positive draft story signaling maybe higher development for him. Fast over-the-top throwing motion. Now, like Brian Nava, he has a strong arm, maybe not quite as strong, and he's not very mobile. Holcomb is a deep ball thrower. Very good down the field, but C short accuracy, B under pressure, and C throw on the run. So if you have a vertical attacking offense, he would be a really nice fit. I don't consider that to be our style. That brings us to Kerry Farrell, who's an interesting player because he's a little more well-rounded. He is a strong arm archetype quarterback, but with solid to good speed and great to elite acceleration. So he might not be somebody you run like a ton of read options with, but you know, maybe he has high 70s, low 80s speed, and that's enough to be functional outside the pocket. C throw on the run, C throw under pressure, and then B accuracies across the board. There is a little injury-prone factor you have to consider as well, although quarterbacks don't really get hurt in this Madden. But Kerry Farrell's a really interesting prospect if it's important to you to have a little mobility. And once you're used to having that mobility, it's hard to go away from it. But after finishing the season the way we did, playing Adam Kane, a traditional pocket passer who cannot leave the pocket, I do feel all right giving up some of that mobility. One player I think I still want to get more info on is Grambling State quarterback Simon Clemens. Now, he's a scrambler archetype, the only one really that we're looking at here. And he's a good athlete. He's above average in every category, and that includes his throw power. He has B deep accuracy, B to D medium, and I think depending on where that medium lands, that determines where he should be drafted. If that comes in as a C, I think he's a day 2 guy. If it's a B, then I think he's low day 1, high day 2 because of the upside. He already has A throw on the run, and there could be a lot more A grades there that could help out his mobility and skill as a runner. But we only have him 50% scouted, so I think I want to get more in the offseason. The only other quarterback I have on the board is going to be Bart Hardy, improviser out of West Virginia. He's projected to not even get taken. He has an elongated motion, doesn't have great throw power, but I look at the accuracies and think about, all right, 7th round pick, backup quarterback. All I care about is that you are an accurate passer. And Bart Hardy has B throw under pressure, B deep, B short. He's a draftable player, I think. The rest of the quarterbacks to me were just backup prospects, and I wasn't particularly interested in them. So I think this is a good year to need a quarterback. I think you have 2 guys who are really good first-round pocket passers. Kerry Farrell, who's an intriguing prospect, but I think needs a little more time to get to the level where Holcomb and Nava are as passers. And it would seem that Holcomb is the only one that you would need to take number 1 overall. On the board, we have Brian Nava slipping down a little bit into the mid-first round range. So it does make it tempting for us with a number 1 pick to take somebody else at number 1. and then try to make a move for Brian Nava. If you can get maybe the best player in the draft at another position and then still get the best pure passer, you gotta love that. And the player that has us thinking about going in a different direction at number 1 is going to be wide receiver Trayvon Randolph, because it looks like he is as special as wide receiver prospects come. Elite size at 6'6", 230. A lot of traits, including the concentration drops, which isn't great, but a ton of positive traits in there. And then an above average athlete in pretty much every regard, which isn't normal at 6'6", 230. Trayvon Randolph also a spec catch, a catch in traffic, a catching, a release. So many great things here. The route running will need some work, but I feel like he's got a chance to have X Factor development and be a Rookie of the Year contender. And he can run block, and he has good stiff arms. So he really is the total package at wide receiver. And we can take him if we want him, right at number 1. Now, at wide receiver, I do think that it's important for us to find another complementary receiver. It doesn't necessarily have to be like an outside wideout, and I'd really like to get a slot receiver in this draft. I have found that archetype to be hard to find just in general in this game, because they focus so much on the playmaker archetype, and as you can tell, there aren't many playmakers on my board. I just don't end up liking a lot of those prospects. And if you want route running ability on day 1, you've got to look for a different archetype. The second receiver on the board here is Julian Crawford. He's fallen 20 spots because he has an injury concern storyline. He's 6'4", 218, probably going to be an outside receiver and not anywhere near the athlete that Randolph is. But I like that A route running, the A spec catch, the B catch in traffic. He does have big slot upside, but I still worry about his lack of athleticism. This year we played with Kendrick Bourne in the slot, and by the end of the year it was Kyle Phillips. I'd like to find somebody else in the draft that can fit that slot skill set. Ricardo Drayton, projected to go on day 2. We do get an alright athletic profile here. I like the A catch in traffic. I like the A catching. If short route running came in high, I would have interest, but he does seem a little bit limited. I do have a receiver here that's projected to go undrafted in Christopher Carradine, but I think he's also very limited to the slot, doesn't offer a lot in terms of athletic upside or yards after the catch ability. So I only have like a 5th or 6th round grade on him. As I go through my entire board, I'm trying to write down, what round I'd be willing to take a guy. And I'm just not finding a lot of receivers that I really want to take early. I think of Justin Aldridge as a 2nd round player, but I just can't see us taking him. He does have pretty good speed and strength, but the route running just doesn't really make him a fit for the slot. And I think he'd just be, fighting for snaps with like Treylon Burks. A player I like a bit more is Christian Crocker, a receiver out of LSU, and he's projected to go pretty early. Solid to good speed, decent to solid acceleration, but you do get good short route running, A spec catch, A catch in traffic, and C medium route running. I don't want too many D grades here to work on, but I think Crocker is somebody that could, be good in the slot right away and then over time get better at other things. All right, here's a weird one. He's not actually a good prospect here. Tim Cannon, I got the storyline that he is going to be moving to tight end. He's 5'11", 219, which would make him one of the smallest tight ends to ever play the game. And here's the story. He's going to be adding weight and converting the tight end. So he's still 5'11", he's not adding height. I can't wait to see this draft profile when I guess he moves to a new position. Overall, I am underwhelmed with the receiver class as a whole, and there are many players here in the top 10 that just haven't cracked our board. And sometimes that's because I know where our roster is and that I won't be drafting a player. Not that he's literally undraftable, but he's not going to be drafted by us. I'm trying to keep a smaller board. So I only have one player with a 1st round grade, and that's going to be Trayvon Randolph. and I don't really see great chances to go get a slot receiver in this draft. I feel like that's going to be, again, something we look to in free agency. Sticking with the offensive skill talent, let's go to running back now. There are many people that watch this series that would like for me to trade Derrick Henry and find the next running back. I do have 5 running backs right now on my board. The number 1 player is Tramel Hale, who is projected to go top 10. I haven't really paid too much attention to him. 6'1", 233, very good athlete, especially at that size. And I think he is going to be a pretty good prospect. Doesn't seem that he has the best pass catching ability, but as a runner, he should be really solid. But I think he's just going to go too early for us to be too invested. I feel like there would need to be a really good prospect for us to take somewhere else, and that might make trading Derrick Henry feel a bit better. Tyreek Lindsey won the Best Running Back award, not Tramel Hale. Lindsey's stock has been rising. He's on our board at 5'11", 208 pounds. Good to great speed, good to great acceleration. Lindsey has a good spin move, C break tackle, C carrying. I'm not sure I see the first round hype though. I still think that he's kind of a second round player to me. JJ Brown looks like a solid running back, maybe not an elite prospect, does have pretty good speed. And then for skills, you like the spin move, the trucking stands out, and you hope that some of the ranges here, break tackle would be a big one, I think. I only have him 50% scouted though. I haven't put like a ton of attention into running back. What feels a lot more likely is that we take a running back somewhere in the middle of the draft. James Ware offers some power. He's 5'11", 227 pounds. Solid to good speed. Now we get to good to great strength and solid to good acceleration. So, B stiff arm, B trucking, A carrying, but kind of a north and south runner, not going to make anybody miss. And then we have Manny Warner, who is an elusive back at 228 pounds. That always catches my attention. Solid to good speed, so we're in that average range there, but that can sometimes get high 80s into the 90s. And Warner has a good stiff arm, A break tackle, A trucking. So I'm a little more interested just because he has a couple greater strengths to lean on. Jason Trapp is a lot like Manny Warner, but a lot slower. So I have him lower on the board. Only 5 running backs, and again, we don't have a lot of stars here that I feel really excited to take. I'm only going to have 50% scouted for these running backs, so if I didn't get a couple ratings to really stand out, I'm not looking too deep, and I feel like it's still unlikely I take a running back very high this year. Tight end is a spot that I'm, again, not really focused on because we've already drafted a couple tight ends in this series. I have one on the board, and that is Tyler McDonald out of Alabama, who just was very clearly a very good prospect. We only had him 50% scouted, but great speed and strength, and we already know A catching, A run block, B deep route running. This is a lucky profile. We got like all the stuff that would tell you right away that he's a good prospect, and there isn't a whole lot more to say. So that's certainly not to say that there aren't other really good tight ends in this draft. It's just not really a focus of mine. And to be really sure on some of these players, I'd have to scout them more. Like, I'm guessing Roberto Reyes would be a really solid vertical threat tight end. He's got all the athleticism. The ranges here show A to C in the key spots. I just don't know it. For the O-line, we already knew it was pretty weak in the interior, and I only have one interior player on the board, and that's going to be Caleb Edmonds, a guard from Washington. Edmonds has great to elite strength, very important there in the running game, and he is a better run blocker than pass blocker, but does struggle a bit with the finesse. So he's not a complete player, but he's powerful. I found some tackles that I like in this draft, but I'm probably more likely to take one later on than early. I do like Justin McCoy, but he's probably going to go round 1, and he doesn't have a lot of strength, so he's not going to be the best run blocker, but if you just want a good pass protector, he looks like one of the best. I like finding these day 3 tackles with pass protector archetype and then figuring out who could be like a really good backup. Offensive line injuries do happen, And when they do, it's nice to just have somebody who has a couple good pass block ratings. So none of these players will necessarily like wow you, but it's good to have that sixth offensive lineman that can step in. Here is Malachi Mitchell, another Porta marginal strength tackle, but B finesse pass blocking and power at the same time. Evan Hewitt was named the best tackle in college football this year, so I can't imagine he'll be around for us, but he does have, average athleticism and a little strength, so a little more balance there, and should end up being a solid tackle. Only 50% scouted though. Cameron Stallings is another player who does have the pass block upside, I think, to be that sixth lineman, but I just wonder about some of these players developing into anything more because of their relative lack of strength and run blocking skill. All in all, with the offensive side, I didn't spend enough scouting here to get excited for a lot of players. The wide receivers to me were just a little bit underwhelming, but I still have some guys that I'd like to take in the second round possibly. I like the quarterbacks a lot. I think that there are maybe some contributors at running back, but I wonder how many full-time starters there could be. And I just didn't spend the scouting on like tight end or O-line as heavily this year. I've done that a lot in the first 2 years. This was really meant to be a bit more of a defensive draft for us, and given the way we've played this year defensively, breaking the record for points allowed, that's where I want to spend the bulk of our attention. It's just, at the very beginning, it could be an offensive focused draft because we need a quarterback, and we have a rare chance to go and get a spectacular wide receiver prospect. But once we've solved those two needs, I think it's going to be a lot of defense. Going to right end, there are a couple players that we should be considering right at number 1 overall. This defense was so bad, how can you not be tempted to go and try to solve some of these issues with the number 1 pick? Tim Bishop would be the projected number 1 player, and this is what's going to make the mock draft this year really interesting. We own the number 1 pick, and if we go off the board and don't take the number 1 projected player, that mock draft is not going to be as useful because we're going to break it right away if we take a player like Trayvon Randolph or a quarterback. But Tim Bishop, I think if we hadn't already given a huge contract to Rashawn Gary and taken Terrell Riddick in the first round, he'd be somebody that we would probably be almost locking in this stage. I think he's a blue chip pass rusher. When we were the 6th worst team in the NFL, we were being projected to take Marquise Cone out of Washington State, and I think that his stock has actually come up a little bit. He's a power rusher, good strength, solid athlete at the same time. B power, B awareness, D finesse, A tackle. I don't know if he's a top 5 caliber player, but I think he's definitely a first. We go down to Rasheem Darman here out of Boston College, another first-round power rusher. And you can never have enough pass rushers, so we could consider taking one early and moving guys around. I mean, we can move Rashawn Gary into like an interior rushing role and then have a third pass rusher that we like. There's always ways you can deploy these pass rushers. Darman, B power, B awareness, and C finesse. So I like the long-term upside of him being pretty good at just about everything. There's not a lot of chance for D grades to show up. I think Chuck Bradley's one of those players, though, that could end up being one of our focus players if we have the room for a day 3, possibly edge rusher. But I like the finesse and power move combination here. Looks like he's not going to offer a ton in the running game, but as just a pure pass rusher, you can never have enough. For round 1 players, I'm looking for A grades primarily. Zamel Randolph has that with his finesse moves, also good tackling. Might not be great against the run right away, but another solid speed rusher. It's a really good year to need a pass rusher early on, and we're not in that situation, obviously. This is not a spot I've put a ton of attention into, but it's clear to see the players on the high end are very promising. Hugh Grayson, here's a player who might go a little bit later. I haven't given you enough steals in this video, but I think that there could be something here with Hugh Grayson. A power move, A to C finesse, another player that can just get to the quarterback, has a bunch of traits to go with it. Not the strongest player, but, solid speed and acceleration could be solid enough. So I think he's certainly an intriguing player that I would be willing to take in the 3rd round and possibly even late 2nd. And then defensive tackle's an interesting one because I have scouted a lot for this, but I also traded for a player in Liam McNeil that I think can kind of solve that nose tackle need that we've had. Unfortunately, he didn't get to play much for us, therefore didn't get a lot of development down the stretch, but I think Liam McNeil, whom we've already re-signed, can be that nose tackle we're looking for. But I focused a lot on the run stoppers in this class, and there are enough that offer flexibility, and I think that you can still consider taking a guy like Alan Hilliard. I really like him, because he also has finesse moves to go with his run stopping ability, C power move. Now, where he falls a little bit short is nothing athletically pops, but even if he's average to above average, I think that with this skill set, I like him as a 1st round player, and I think that he has a chance to be extremely well-rounded. I have a very high grade on him. And I think for a lot of these run stoppers, it comes down to, all right, you can stop the run a little bit. What else? Is there anything else? Damian Binns, run stopper with some finesse upside. I don't think he's as good as Hilliard skill-wise, but he is a better athlete. So how do you weigh that? Because he too looks like he could be a well-rounded player, only with more athleticism. There are some injury risks with him, though. I noticed the 1st to 2nd round grades on these guys. If they're there in the 2nd round, and we've already taken like a quarterback plus a player, I'm going to be interested. Kadeem Kidd, round 1 to 2 player. Another run stopper that I think offers more, which is really exciting, and C power move. So, I like having options, so it's not just, get this one guy or you miss out entirely. So, I like our chances to come away with a defensive tackle if we're willing to do it early. And if we do make a move like this, it does make it easier to trade Jeffrey Simmons, or we trade him knowing that we got plenty of chances in the draft to find the next guy, and we're going to have a good front 4 if we do that. Manny Herrick, we have a day 2 guy, speed rusher, and now we're getting away from the run stopping archetype. He is a very good athlete, and I like that A finesse move popping off the board, B awareness. Definitely a 2nd round player for me, given that A finesse move with the athleticism. I think even late 1, you could talk yourself into him. It's a lot more fun going through these defenders right now. I wasn't really excited going through the offensive players, but also like after Trayvon Randolph and the quarterbacks, it's hard to get excited about those other players. We go down here into the middle of the 1st round, or middle of the draft rather. Marcus Patrick. You can maybe take a guy in the 3rd to 4th round that offers the finesse upside that he does. Marcus Patrick might end up being the target because unlike a lot of these other players, he's not injury prone, but he gives you that pass rush upside, the run stopping upside. He does have good athleticism. To me, Marcus Patrick is way above his projection, firmly a 2nd round player. And the list just keeps going. Like Taylor Jackson has A finesse, B block shed, C power. I mean, this is certainly a year for us to go get a defensive tackle. It's very clear. I have a list of like 6 guys that I think could all play this role, could all do run stopping plus something else. This needs to be something we absolutely draft this year. I'm going to give Taylor Jackson a 1st round grade. Like, I think he's that good. I do have Angelo Blades here later on, and once you get late, now you're getting nose tackles who only offer run stopping ability. So far, I'd say this defensive line group is just the strongest in the entire draft. I haven't even gotten to the outside linebackers that can edge rush either. Now, I only have 1 player at those outside linebacker spots that are even on my board, and that's a coverage player at the same time. There aren't a lot of players here rated at the top, and Jarrett Coles is one who had a negative story. He had a really bad bowl game, so he's a good athlete, but I don't have a lot of information on him. Let's focus now on the inside linebackers. I think we'll get a lot more out of this. Now, this is a big need. I only have 4 middle linebackers on the board and then 1 outside linebacker who did have coverage as his archetype, but we know that can usually be a trap. Howie Shaughnessy was named the best linebacker in the stories. He's a field general. We need to find a field general linebacker this year, and maybe that's in free agency, maybe that's in the draft. Shaughnessy, marginal to decent strength. You don't like to see that. His speed is only solid to good. And then skill-wise, A awareness, B finesse, C zone coverage. I just don't know if I see the round 1 skill there. Maybe because he has a good draft story, you'd be willing to take him there in the first round. But I certainly don't think he's like a great linebacker prospect. Bruce Baskett, field general from Columbia. He's somebody projected to go on day 2. And athletically, nothing special there. He does have B hit power, B man coverage, but D tackling and D zone coverage. So some holes in his game right away. Connor Knox is a pass coverage specialist out of Notre Dame. 6'2", 237. Now we get some better athleticism and some more range at linebacker. That's important. With that range, he does have B man and A to C zone coverage, B awareness, and B tackling with B hit power. I think he's probably my favorite linebacker. He offers the most in terms of coverage, the most in terms of speed, and I think there's a chance that he can play all 3 downs pretty well, and the block shed might just be the one thing to really work on. And then I have Cameron Fowler, who is a run stopper. I think I scouted him when we were just... Well, I guess we didn't stop the run at any point, but at some point I was just like, find me hit power and block shed, and I'll put those players on the board. And then Romeo Hayden here, pass coverage, outside linebacker. You really can't trust that the coverage is really going to be great here for these players, but you can look at the athleticism, look at the run stopping, and kind of go from there. Hayden does have really good athleticism, but isn't the strongest player. Yeah, the man coverage says A. I'm kind of ignoring that, but he's on the board because of his athleticism. That was a briefer breakdown than I would like for the linebacker position when it was such a problem for us last year, and I don't really see the chances to go get like day 1 starters at linebacker. If we go through some of these other field general inside linebackers you'd normally be looking for, you know, good to great speed here, solid to good acceleration for Preston Worth. We have D hit power, D block shed, C to F man coverage, D tackling. Like, I can't get excited for that. Here's Andrew Sullivan, somebody that I think could end up being somebody that I would take on day 2 if we got more info. I think he's one of the better options we've seen today for that focus player scenario. Cornerback, I didn't have a lot of focus on this year, but it's supposed to be a really strong position group with potentially 8 players going in the first round, a couple in the top 10. It's just not going to be something we do early when cornerback is the strongest position, arguably, on the roster with our 2 starters. I do want to add a corner, but I want to add a slot. And I'm not going to take a corner in round 1 this year. But there are some really good players like Sammy Barden and Duke Bowie. Bowie had the storyline for a great bowl game, and Sammy Barden actually was the Heisman winner at corner. So it just shows how stacked this top 5 is when we're like looking at a generational wide receiver, and then you've got some of these other players that would also be excellent number 1 picks. So I was looking at corners a little bit later in the draft to try to find a slot. Like Roger McCreary has done okay there. He hasn't been a big time playmaker. He's had some time to start. And now I think like we can draft a rookie to potentially push him there. I'm looking for man cover ability, maybe some press just to make you more flexible, and good athleticism. Daryl Moore, I think, is a fine option here. Maybe 4th round. Caleb Hawley has a little more speed, and then he has the B press and C man combination, D zone. But I think that corners with, C and D you don't think of as good, but it's hard to get higher than that. So you have to take what you can get and rely on some good athleticism. Safety is a spot where I really like a lot of these players on the high end, but I don't know that we're going to be in the best position to take them. Terrell Parker was named the best safety in the draft stories, and I really like him. He's a hybrid skill player. I'd love a hybrid safety that you could play in the slot and then play at deep safety and have them hit a little bit at the same time. I love that skill set, but it's hard to find. Terrell Parker, I think, does have the skill to be a day one slot corner, which makes him really intriguing because that's a spot I'm trying to fill on the team, and we could use a starting safety. So you've already found a role that can, get him on the field for a lot of snaps, but are you picking early enough to take a guy like him? A player I'd like a lot more info on is DeMarcus Elliott. He's a safety out of New Hampshire. And I'm looking for somebody now that can give us the range we used to have with Kevin Byard. So I need that speed. Elliott has it. And then I need some good zone cover ability. B to D there. B to D man coverage. He's just somebody that I think we need to consider for the focus player or private workout deal. Marco Kilroy had the story for setting the UCF interception record for a single season this year. So here's the deep zone safety. I like a little more speed there just to have a lot of ground to cover. But I think that Kilroy is very solid round one safety. John Murray is interesting because he's a zone archetype safety, but I do feel like he has a bit of a hybrid skill set with C-man and C-zone coverage with B tackling and B block shed. I have a lot of interest in Murray. Gerald Williams. Now we get more speed and acceleration. So I like my rangy safeties, and I think that it's important to have that if you want to play this aggressive man coverage. Need some safeties that can back that up. He has B zone coverage, B awareness, and A hit power. Sign me up in the first round. So right now I have 64 players on our board, and maybe I'll find a few more as I go through players a second or third time. And I have 21 players that I have round one grades on. There might be a couple more if the scouting, like if I scout them further and I'm more sure of it. But like 21 players right now is how many I feel good about taking early. But, a few of those are at quarterback. I'm only going to take one. And then a bunch of defensive tackles. So what I think I struggle with right now is finding fifth round safeties I'm excited about. And I guess if I was excited about them, they wouldn't really be fifth round prospects all the time. So, I wonder if we're going to be able to make the most out of those later picks. But I do like how we're set up to hopefully make the most out of the top 100 this year. We're going to have 6 picks in the top 100 this year, unless we do some trading up, and that's looking likely if we take Randolph at 1 and then move up for a quarterback. Maybe it ends up being 4 top 100 picks at the end of the day, or we give up a future pick to go and secure the quarterback. That's always an option. But this certainly feels like a draft where we need to go get a lot of difference makers. And I think that if I have to move up, I will be very much willing to use that next year's first because there are, I like Randolph a ton. I like the quarterbacks. I love the defensive tackles. And we need to figure out what we're doing at linebacker. So I feel like in this range, I need to come away with 4 or 5 players. Ideally, we'd have a lot of young players getting playing time next year, and we can spend 2025 just getting those players as good as we can. If we end up back in the playoff hunt, that's a bonus, but it's going to be focused on just building this team up and developing those players. So let me load up on the young guys here in 2025. I think we have good options early for rebuilding the defense and finding a new quarterback, and we'll let 2026, that's a different battle. This mock draft is pretty old because it has us still picking at 6, and a lot of these player values have changed. But this is where players were projected to go the last time we got a mock draft in this franchise, giving you an idea of who maybe is out of reach for us, but who maybe could slide into the second round if some of these values hold. Josh Holcomb all the way down at 32. I don't think it's going to stay that way. Another thing I'm thinking about, because wide receiver is supposed to be a strong position group here, You know, maybe I don't have to find the guy who's just the perfect slot on day one, but can I find a guy that could become that in a year's time? Here's Chris Barnes. Here's a wide receiver from Alabama, 5'11", 193. Definitely a body type that you think of for the slot. Really good acceleration, speed, agility, change of direction. Now, right now, he's a deep threat, and that's what he does best. D short route running, I wish it were at least a C. But could you turn him into a slot with that athleticism? I think I have to be open to some of those spots where a player maybe isn't what I want right away, but can I get them there just based on athleticism and maybe a year worth of playing time? I think this was really helpful for me. It lets me really see what I can get done in those top 100 picks and how this team can begin to come together if we do this correctly. I do think my favorite pick so far at number 1 is to take Trayvon Randolph. Another first round playmaker. And this could really help make the offense just ridiculous for our rookie quarterback that we end up bringing in. Imagine being able to step into an offense with Derrick Henry, Sal Sexton, Devian Bynes, and then Trayvon Randolph. That is a really good situation. And if we're going to have a pocket passer, which the best quarterbacks in this class are pocket passers, you know, you lose that mobility. So I think it's nice to have a ton of targets to involve. And I want to do a better job of utilizing our running backs in the pass game. So Rashad Polite this year had 30 receptions. And later in the season, I really tried to make an effort to get him more regular catches. And it's just something that's never really been a huge role in the offenses that I've run. But I want it to be. I want it to be a lot more than 30 next year. I think it's one of the missing pieces for the offenses that I tend to run with pocket passers. 40 catches last year for running backs is a lot less than I'd like to have. The offseason will be streamed this Saturday until further notice. I think it'll be Saturday, 2 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Let me know down below what players you think we need to draft to turn this team around so we do not pick number 1 next year. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in a very big offseason, one of the biggest any of my franchises has really ever had. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.